Chapter 1. Reincarnation, 1, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Woo, woo, woo wah. The endless crying was not helping with her head-splitting pain. So much pain. Leng Ruoxue felt as though she had just been run over by a car. So noisy. Still half-conscious, Leng Ruoxue groaned in annoyance. Miss, you're finally awake. Woo, woo. You are just too noisy. I don't even want to wake up, Leng Ruoxue complained in her head. Enduring the discomfort, she reluctantly opened her eyes. In front of her was an unfamiliar girl wearing an emerald green muslin outfit. The girl had an innocent-looking face, and if not for the 2 streams of tears falling down her cheeks and her pair of red, swollen eyes, she would be very adorable. Where is this? Shouldn't I have died from the plane crash? Leng Ruoxue's dear cousin Leng Qier would definitely tell everyone that she died in a plane accident. And her dear grandfather would, of course, just let it be because he would have lost his most useful pawn and couldn't do much about it anymore. Since childhood, Leng Qier could not beat her in anything, so she was very jealous. She had always felt that Leng Ruoxue had stolen her inheritance and her beloved man. So this time, she bribed the pilot to plant a bomb on the plane. Who are you? Where is this place? Leng Ruoxue asked weakly. Mississippi. You're my young miss. I'm your maidservant, Chui Zhu. Mississippi, don't you recognize Chui Zhu anymore? Woo. It's all my fault. I didn't protect Miss from all the bad people. Chui Zhu's excitement from seeing Leng Ruoxue wake up was immediately overrun by a new wave of despair when she realized that her young miss could no longer recognize her. Wait, stop crying. Where is this place? Leng Ruoxue was feeling a bit annoyed by all the crying. Oh miss, this your home? This is the general's mansion. Chui Zhu answered while still sobbing. She was just too concerned. Why was her young miss so mad about her crying? My home. Leng Ruoxue tilted her head and looked around the well-furnished room. All the furniture was made from wood, and many of them even looked like precious historical artifacts. And the maidservant's dress seemed to be from ancient times. But wasn't she supposed to be dead? Chui Zhu, I think I've lost my memory. Leng Ruoxue sighed helplessly. Before she could understand what was happening, she would just pretend that she had lost her memory. Oh, my poor young miss. Chui Zhu, what is this city called? And what's my name? You are Leng Ruoxue, Mississippi. You are the granddaughter of the leading general of the Eastern Lagoon Empire. We are in Phoenix City, the capital of the empire. Miss, you were in a coma for 3 days. And you don't even remember me now. So, this young miss is also named Leng Ruoxue. And she also fell into a coma. What a coincidence. Leng Ruoxue had even more questions, but she kept her composure. I fell into a coma. What happened? No wonder she felt as if her head was going to split open at any moment. It's the notorious 7th Prince and Su Nar, that filthy woman. They hurt you, and Chui Zhu couldn't even protect you. Chui Zhu was wallowing in self-blame, and tears were welling up in her eyes again. Miss woke up. Just as Leng Ruoxue wanted to continue digging out more information from the innocent Chui Zhu, a tall young lady in black walked in. Her pretty face was also full of concern, but she was much older and very composed. Who is this? Another maidservant. But she's elegant enough to be mistaken as the daughter of a big family. Sister Lu Tao. Miss lost her memory, and she can't recognize us anymore. Woo, woo. Mississippi. Lu Tao looked at Leng Ruoxue with concern. But then she suddenly exploded and said fiercely, Miss, don't be scared. Lu Tao won't let that filthy woman bully you anymore. Lu Tao will definitely protect you and won't let this happen again. So you're called Lu Tao? Leng Ruoxue looked at Lu Tao with her bright eyes. Interesting girl. A fiery girl hidden behind all that elegance. Miss, what did you just say? Lu Tao's eyes widened in disbelief. I asked you whether you're called Lu Tao. Leng Ruoxue frowned in slight displeasure. Oh. Mississippi. You've recovered. This is amazing. Lu Tao could tell that her young miss, despite being confused, looked alert and could even speak fluently. Her young miss had always been intellectually disabled since birth. She could still remember that the first time she tried to teach her their names, her young miss took ages to remember. So seeing this change, she couldn't hold back her excitement. Leng Ruoxue had no idea why the maidservants were so excited. It was very strange. Lu Tao, I can't remember what happened in the past. Can you tell me about it? Leng Ruoxue didn't want to ask Cui Zhu anymore. Cui Zhu really liked to cry. Yes, Mississippi Lu Tao will tell you from the time you were born. Lu Tao was obviously still brimming with joy. Lu Tao, just start from how I became hurt. Leng Ruoxue wanted to hear more, but Lu Tao wanted to recount everything that happened since Leng Ruoxue's birth. This was way too much. Miss, it's because of the seventh prince. Lu Tao paused and looked at her young miss. Seeing that her young miss didn't really react much to the name, she finally continued, L.RG. Chapter 2. Reincarnation, 2, you are listening at novelfull.audio. After listening for more than an hour, Leng Ruoxue finally sorted out what happened. It turned out that Lu Tao was so excited mainly because her foolish young miss became sober. This was absolutely great news for the general's mansion. This was because the young miss they were talking about was not only intellectually disabled and mentally unsound since birth, but she was also the fiancée of the seventh prince, the culprit who hurt her. Her so-called fiancé not only disliked her for being a fool, but he also had a lover. Her love rival was Su Naer from the Su family, one of the 5 great families. The foolish Leng Ruoxue had been very infatuated with her fiancé and had always done her best to be around him. She would chase after him whenever others mentioned where the seventh prince was. The Su family used her feelings for the seventh prince to trick her out, humiliated her in every possible way, and injured her. This led her to her coma that lasted for 3 days, which she only awakened from today. Moreover, she regained her sanity after waking up from the coma. No wonder the maidservants were so happy. Only Leng Ruoxue knew that it was not the foolish lady who woke up but a soul from another world. God allowed her to be reborn again even though she died in a plane crash, so she had to live a better life than her last life. 7th Prince Li Yu and Su Naer, just wait for me to exact my revenge. She had to compensate the original owner of the body in certain ways. She would not let her death be in vain. Miss, you are so beautiful. Qi Zhu combed Leng Ruoxue's hair while looking at her beautiful face. It was a face so breathtaking that she was unable to move her eyes away, and she stared herself silly. She knew that her young miss was a beauty since a long time ago, but she did not expect that she would be so beautiful without makeup. Leng Ruoxue was obviously much better than the previous few days. She looked at herself in the bronze mirror while sitting on the leather stool of the dressing table. She had a cold temperament, and her skin was tender and moisturized. Her beauty was enough for her to become the top beauty in the city, and she had to admit that this face was even more beautiful than the one she had in her previous life. Ednel.co however, her appearance was not like what it was when she first saw how she looked. At that time, not only did she have thick powder on her face, but she also painted herself with all sorts of colors, and the clothes she was wearing were fancy too. She knew from the residual memories of the body that the original owner of the body made herself this way. This was because she heard that that was what the seventh prince liked. Moreover, her grandfather loved her so much that he let her do whatever she wanted. Leng Ruoxue really didn't expect this body to retain its memories and fuse with her own memories. Unfortunately, there were not many useful ones. The one thing she remembered the most was the scumbag's seventh prince. However, she also knew that it was impossible to count on the memories of an intellectually disabled person. The reason for her injury was basically what Lu Tao had explained. She could not blame the two maidservants for not protecting her. She could only blame that scumbag for being too attractive. "Miss, these are the books you wanted." Lu Tao walked in with a few old books in her hand, interrupting her thoughts. Lu Tao placed the book gently in front of Leng Ruoxue and left the room with Qi Zhu so that they would not disturb their young miss reading. She knew that her young miss had fallen in love with reading since she woke up sober, and no one was allowed to interrupt her reading. There were 3 books in total. The first was Ling Feng Record, which recorded the extraordinary people and marvels on this continent. It also included the origin of this continent, the distribution of countries, geographical locations, and the like. The second was Summary of Spiritual Power, which introduced the sources of types of spiritual power, how to awaken spiritual power, etc. There was also a book named Introduction to Professions, which was mainly a book that introduced the types and levels of professions. These books might be the most basic, but they were also what she needed to understand the most right now. Leng Ruoxue first read Ling Feng Record and knew that this continent was called Ling Feng Continent. There were not only humans but also a wide range of spiritual beasts on the continent. And the current country she was in was the Eastern Lagoon Empire, one of the 5 most powerful countries on the Ling Feng continent. The 5 great countries and the 5 great families were the top powers in this world. The people in this world admired the strong, and only the strong would be respected by others. Even those who had good pedigrees but were weak would be cast aside. The foolish Leng Ruoxue was the best example. She had a noble background, but because she was a fool, even ordinary civilians in the Eastern Lagoon Empire looked down on her. Leng Ruoxue was happy with her current predicament. She did not want to continue being someone who was bullied and scolded like rubbish. She was going to be a powerhouse who rose above the 9 heavens. She would not be at the mercy of anyone. Introduction to Professions introduced that the world's most respected and powerful profession was spiritualist, while alchemists, artificers, and beast trainers were equally noble in status but were not admired by people because of the high threshold. Therefore, spiritualists could be said to be the most popular profession, but not everyone could become a high status spiritualist. The first prerequisite for becoming a spiritualist was spiritual power awakening, and being able to awaken successfully to become a spiritualist probably only accounted for 1,000th of the population. Becoming a spiritualist was also one of the basic requirements for becoming an alchemist, artificer, and beast trainer. This showed the importance of spiritualists. The former owner of this body was a fool and had never awakened spiritual power. Leng Ruoxue was not sure whether she had the qualifications to cultivate spiritual power. Moreover, the best age for spiritual power awakening was between 5 to 10 years old. She was already 15 years old this year, and she didn't know if she had any chance of awakening, but she had to try whether she could awaken or not. She had never been a person who would give up easily, not to mention that this was only her first test to becoming a powerhouse. Leng Ruoxue carefully read the content described in Summary of Spiritual Power, especially the important part about spiritual power awakening. She decided to carry out spiritual power awakening after she had learned it by heart. Lu Tao, Mississippi. Lu Tao heard the lady calling her and responded from outside the door. She opened the door, slowed her footsteps, and walked in softly. Lu Tao, I want to try spiritual power awakening. Remember, don't allow anyone to disturb me. Leng Ruoxue raised her beautiful eyes slightly and ordered. Mississippi. Lu Tao opened her mouth slightly, wanting to say something but stopped herself. In fact, she originally wanted to persuade her to wait for the general to return before she started her spiritual awakening. Her young miss was already 15 years old, and there was no precedent for someone on the Ling Feng continent to complete a successful spiritual awakening at 15 years old. She was afraid of the danger, but after several days of getting along with her young miss, she knew that her young miss had a strong desire to become a powerhouse. She knew that her young miss would not change her mind once she had decided. In the words of her young miss, how could she know that she would not succeed if she did not try? Moreover, how could she become a powerhouse if she did not have the courage to try? Lu Tao knew that her young miss was right, so she did not try to dissuade her after thinking about it. Chapter 3. Awakening of Spiritual Power. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Miss, don't worry. This servant knows what to do. Lu Tao closed the door and exited the room. Leng Ruoxue is very satisfied with Lu Tao's performance. She might be a maidservant, but she knew her place and how to advance and retreat. She was someone teachable. Moreover, she had always liked such subordinates. In fact, Lu Tao might be treating her the same as she did with the silly Ruoxue, but she would not blame her for that. She could see that the two maidservants really cared for the silly Ruoxue and were constantly afraid that she would be injured, so they would therefore do more at times. However, this was because they were faithful after all. Thus, she would give them the opportunity to know that they did not need to treat her like the silly Ruoxue before. It would be best if they could wake up on their own and be used by her. Lu Tao seemed to have realized what was happening, but Qi Zhu might need some adjustment since she was too pure. Leng Ruoxue looked at the method again and confirmed the mnemonic chant so that she would not make any mistake. Then she sat cross-legged on the carpet and commenced the awakening. She closed her eyes and meditated silently with the mnemonic chant while seeing and feeling the spiritual energy in her body. The tiny, transparent, thread-like spiritual energy formed small clusters. This was the spiritual energy inherent in everyone's body, colorless and transparent. But it could only stay in the body and could not be used. However, it was precisely because of the existence of this spiritual energy that the lifespan of people in this world was much longer than the lifespan of people in her previous life. What she had to do now was to draw this spiritual energy out of the body and merge it with the immense spiritual energy of heaven and earth so that her body could absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth and use it as her own. She felt the originally static spiritual energy in her body begin to flow slowly from her dantian. She sensed the beckoning of the massive spiritual energy outside of her body as her spiritual energy moved very orderly and went bit by bit out of her body. She knew that this was the key to eliciting the spiritual energy, and no mistake could be made, so she waited patiently. After a long time, Leng Ruoxue opened her beautiful eyes. The brilliance in her eyes flowed, and her whole person felt more spiritual. She could feel herself being different from before, so it should be considered a success, right? Leng Ruoxue couldn't help thinking this, but she couldn't be sure. She hadn't seen anyone awakening with her own eyes after all. She looked down and found that her dantian no longer had a colorless and transparent cluster but a fist-sized colorful light ball. What does this mean? Leng Ruoxue couldn't help but be stunned. Why is it different from what Lu Tao and the book said? This situation wasn't mentioned in the book, but it seems to be a success even though it's a bit different from what I know. Leng Ruoxue closed her eyes again and prepared to absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. After awakening, the body would be able to absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth on its own and store it in the dantian. After storing enough spiritual energy, she would be able to break through and enter the next stage. The higher the stage, the more spiritual energy needed to advance. Similarly, the higher the stage, the more spiritual energy could be stored. Moreover, more spiritual energy would be needed for higher level techniques. Soon after Leng Ruoxue closed her eyes and began to absorb spiritual energy, she saw more and more wisps of spiritual energy swarming toward her from all directions, rushing to burrow into her body. And she herself was surrounded by a huge sphere of spiritual power. If anyone were here now to see this, they would be scared to death. How could anyone absorb spiritual power like this? Sister Lu Tao, why hasn't Miss emerged yet? Cui Zhu's delicate face was full of worry. It had been 2 days, and she did not know what was happening with her young miss. Qi Zhu, Miss will succeed. We should have confidence in Mississippi. Lu Tao looked calm, but she was nervous as well. Shuer, where is my darling Shuer? When the 2 little servant girls heard the loud voice coming from outside the yard, they exchanged glances, and their hearts shook. We're dead. Old Master is back. The tall figure towered in front of them just as they were fumbling over what their replies should be to the Old Master. The 2 looked at each other, and a wry smile appeared on their young and beautiful faces. Alas, with the extent of the Old Master's love for their young miss, if he knew that she had done such a dangerous thing and that they did not know what the current situation inside was, the Old Master would go crazy. Besides, no one could stop the Old Master in the entire country if he really went crazy and unleashed his full strength, save for his best friend. Why are you 2 standing outside instead of taking care of your young miss? Are you being lazy? General Leng Qingtian said with great displeasure. He had hurried to see his precious granddaughter the moment he returned to the general's mansion. He got the 2 maidservants to take care of his baby granddaughter, but they actually allowed her to become injured. He rushed back immediately when he received the news, not daring to delay for a moment. However, when he saw these 2 girls whom he had carefully selected standing outside Shuer's room panicking, his anger came up immediately. Humph, I would have dealt with them if I hadn't received the news on the road that my baby granddaughter has already awakened from her coma. Old Master, it was Miss who asked us servants to stay outside. Miss said that no one is allowed to disturb her. Lu Tao, who knew their Old Master's temper very well, quickly said. Her nervous palms were sweating, and she only hoped that the young miss could immediately appear in front of the Old Master. What is Shuer doing in the room? Leng Qingtian's eyes were deep and unpredictable, but his tone was light and without emotion. Miss. Tell me. The family law awaits if you dare to conceal anything. Leng Qingtian said with a serious face and stern tone. He deliberately released a trace of his might. These servants seemed to be taking his words lightly just because he was away for a few days. He knew something was amiss the moment he saw their nervousness. Lu Tao and Qi Zhu knelt on the ground with a plop. They were only at the great spiritualist stage and could not withstand the aggressive might. At this moment, the door of the room suddenly opened, and a breathtaking young girl dressed in red emerged. All 3 of them became dumbfounded. Chapter 4. The Top General Protector. 1. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Mississippi. Lu Tao and Cui Zhu finally came back to their senses after being dazzled like idiots. They nearly drooled. Are you my Shuer? Leng Qingtian muttered as he looked at the face that was almost similar to his dead daughter. Laws. Grandpa, don't you even recognize your own granddaughter? Leng Ruoshua's bright eyes looked at her grandfather. She could recall the extremely protective ways of that silly Ruoshua's grandfather, as she had inherited her memory and body. Yes, this grandfather protected all the silly Ruoshua's shortcomings and loved her very much, causing her to have a deep affection for him and was very dependent on her grandfather. She felt at home with this old man who loved the silly Ruoshua unconditionally. This old man, hailed as the god of war on the battlefields, also gave her an indescribable feeling of admiration, and the old man's love for his granddaughter was the familial love she had always longed for. This was why she had decided to treat this grandfather as her own before she met him. Seeing him in person strengthened her thinking even further. This grandfather was the famous god of war of the Eastern Lagoon Empire, a powerhouse at peak spiritual sovereign. He was an idol worshipped by countless people. However, this old man, her grandfather, in front of her was disheveled, his face full of stubble, his clothes all dusty. No one would believe it if he was introduced as the top general of the empire. Ha ha ha, that's great. My baby Shuer is really clear-headed. Grandpa is so happy. Come, let Grandpa take a good look. Leng Qingtian's tired face lit up. Her illness was cured, and she was finally worthy of being the daughter of his deceased son and daughter. In law. Grandpa, you must be exhausted after traveling for so many days. Have a good rest and a good night's sleep. Granddaughter will not run away. Granddaughter will let look at me to your heart's content once you are well rested. The pinkish lips on Leng Ruoshua's absolutely beautiful face pouted a little rebelliously. Grandpa isn't tired. Grandpa is happy. Leng Qingtian's face couldn't hide his joy. Now that he saw his granddaughter with his own eyes, he knew that he was not dreaming, and his wish for many years had finally come true. Then Grandpa has to at least take a bath and change clothes. Leng Ruoshua said with a smile on her lips, her bright eyes shining as she said mischievously. Yes, yes, I have to take a bath. Look at my dirty body. Schwer, wait for Grandpa. He disappeared after that. Mississippi. Lu Tao and Cui Zhu were excited. Seeing the spiritual energy surrounding her, they knew that she had successfully awakened. What are you doing on your knees? Get up. Leng Ruoshua glanced at the two maidservants who were still kneeling and stretched out a slender jade finger. Her fingertips released a wisp of spiritual energy, and the silver-white spiritual energy slowly circled her skinny fingers. Silver white. Great spiritualist. Cui Zhu exclaimed in surprise. Lu Tao was relatively calm, but both of them were speechless for a long time. 2 days ago, the young miss had no spiritual power. But today, she had awakened to become a great spiritualist. What kind of astonishing potential was this? Compared to the young miss, could those so-called geniuses be called geniuses? Was the young miss born to shock others? Their aptitude was pretty good, but it took almost 10 years to become great spiritualists, yet their young miss took only 2 days to achieve the same. No, maybe less than 2 days. They were speechless. Schwer. Leng Qingtian walked in steadily after freshening up, but he felt that the atmosphere in the room had become a little weird. What happened? Schwer, you've become a great spiritualist. Leng Qingtian was surprised. In fact, it was not difficult to see her level with his cultivation level. As the saying went, one would be blinded by concern. His mind was on Schwer's sane consciousness, so he hadn't really noticed Schwer's cultivation level. After all, who could have imagined that a person who just became clear-headed would suddenly become a great spiritualist? Leng Qingtian's face changed abruptly, as he seemed to have thought of something. When did this happen? How dare you hide it from me? Who gave you the courage to do that? Guards, come and lock them up to wait for my disposal. Leng Qingtian pointed at Lu Tao and Cui Zhu with an angry face as he ordered the guard at the door. When Schwer was injured, he hadn't had time to punish them. How dare they conceal such an important issue from him? Grandpa, this isn't their fault. I wanted to awaken my spiritual power. You go out first. Leng Ruoshua wheedled her way on it and pulled on one of Leng Qingtian's arms to save the two maidservants. Schwer. Grandpa, my spiritual power has awakened, and now I am a great spiritualist. Is Grandpa unhappy? Leng Ruoshua whispered softly, cozying up to him. Silly girl. Of course, Grandpa is happy. But what if there was any danger during your awakening when Grandpa was not by your side? Grandpa wouldn't be able to save you in that case. Grandpa just wants you to be safe. Do you want Grandpa to die of worry? Leng Qingtian's face became stern again after thinking about it. Grandpa, my dear Grandpa, you're blinded by concern. I know that there is no life-threatening awakening. How could you, a spiritual sovereign, have no idea? Leng Ruoshua said with a light smile. Failure would still cause some damage to the body, but it would not be life-threatening. Lu Tao had already told her before she planned to try the awakening. It was mentioned in the book as well, so she knew it, but she still decided to try. After all, only when you became strong would your destiny be in your own hands. You silly girl. Leng Qingtian scowled deliberately, but he was obviously not so angry anymore. Come, tell Grandpa when you awakened and how you became a great spiritualist. Leng Qingtian also knew that he was a little caught up. I awakened yesterday, Leng Ruoxue replied. And you became a great spiritualist today. Leng Qingtian had a face full of question marks. Such speed. Well, I began absorbing spiritual power after awakening yesterday, and then I already was a great spiritualist when I woke up today. Leng Ruoxue did not expect the aptitude of this body to be so amazing. As far as she knew, even a genius with the best aptitude would take about 1.5 to 2 years to progress from the most basic spiritual practitioner to spiritualist. And it would take about 5 to 6 years to become a great spiritualist. Those with lower aptitudes would take longer. Lu Tao and Qi Zhu had upper-medium aptitude, and it took them about 8 years to cultivate to become great spiritualists. I never thought that my precious granddaughter was such an astonishing genius. Haha, that's great. Leng Qingtian's resolute and serious face was full of a triumphant expression. There was only continuous good news recently, elating him. Chapter 5. The Top General Protector, 2, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Xuer, what attribute is your spiritual power? The spiritual power attributes of the Leng family were basically wind or fire. He had both wind and fire attributes, so spiritualists of the same rank were generally not his opponent. Otherwise, he would not be called a peak spiritual sovereign powerhouse. I'm not sure either. It's okay. Grandpa has test crystals. Grandpa will test it for you when there's time. It was difficult to see the attributes of others unless they used spiritual skills. However, Xuer had just become clear-headed, and he guessed that she had yet to understand many things very well. It was normal not to know what her attributes were. In fact, spiritualists who had just awakened could go to the Spiritualist Guild to test their attributes so that they could practice spiritual skills that suited them. Most large families had crystals ready for testing in order to facilitate testing the younger generations in the family. My little Xuer is now clear-headed, has become a spiritualist, and is a little beauty of the country. Let's see what other reasons 7th Prince Li Yu has not to marry you this time. Leng Qingtian caressed Leng Ruoxue's head lovingly as the topic turned to her marriage. In fact, he had thought about it on the way back. He didn't like the 7th prince at all, nor did he want to become related through marriage to the imperial family. But since Xuer liked the 7th prince so much, then the 7th prince had to marry her no matter whether he liked her or not. He had no say in it. How dare he want to break off the engagement? He was just an idiot dreaming. Grandpa, I don't want to marry the 7th prince. Leng Ruoxue pouted her pink lips and looked at her grandfather with watery eyes. Isn't the 7th prince Xuer's favorite? Why don't you want to marry him? It was best not to marry him since there were many problems with the imperial family, but he still had to ask clearly. Humph. He despised me and got others to humiliate me when I was a fool. Now that I am better, I understand now, so I don't want him anymore. Yes, you don't need him. He might be a prince, but he is not worthy of my Xuer. Tomorrow, Grandpa will enter the palace to break the engagement for my dear Xuer. General Leng was extremely protective. His family's children were good no matter how they were, and no one could bully them. Grandpa, the engagement must be broken, but Xuer's injury this time can't remain unsettled. Leng Ruoxue reminded him with a fox-like smirk. Don't worry. Grandpa knows what to do. Grandpa won't let Xuer be wronged. Leng Qingtian wouldn't let anyone hurt his precious granddaughter. Xuer knows that Grandpa loves Xuer the most. Grandpa, wait for me for a while. Leng Ruoxue thought about it and ran out. After a short while, Leng Ruoxue returned with a large white porcelain bowl in her hand. Xuer, what do you have in your hand? Grandpa, try it. Leng Ruoxue put the bowl in front of Leng Qingtian, looking at him expectantly. Noodles. Yes, Schwer made it myself. Grandpa, try it. Leng Ruoxue was very confident in her cooking skills. In her previous life, she was not only a gourmet but also had good culinary skills. She was definitely able to match up to those famous chefs. Okay. Grandpa will try it. Leng Qingtian picked a few strands with a pair of chopsticks and put them in his mouth. He was stunned and continued. He emptied the bowl in no time. Grandpa, how is it? Is it delicious? Leng Ruoxue was a little uncertain. There were too few seasonings in this world, and the ingredients were a little different, so she could not replicate the taste from her previous life. It's delicious. Delicious. Leng Qingtian even drank every drop of the soup. Originally, he was thinking he would say it was delicious even if it was not delicious. After all, it was Schwer's act of filial piety. When did Schwer learn to make noodles? Leng Qingtian was surprised while still feeling a little unsatisfied. He had never eaten such delicious noodles. Schwer saw the cook making it in the mansion previously, so Schwer tried to make it by myself these few days. Schwer remembered that it was Grandpa's birthday the day before yesterday, so Schwer wanted to make it for Grandpa. Leng Ruoxue had already thought about the reason just now, and the noodles were indeed made by her. It would have been difficult to explain otherwise. She did it because she was moved by the unconditional love of her grandfather. The familial affection she craved in her previous life came through in this life, so she cherished it. Schwer is so filial. Grandpa didn't dote on you for nothing. Leng Qingtian was very pleased that his granddaughter was so good. Miss, you're awake. Lu Tao heard the faint sound on the bed and pulled the pink bed curtain away. She had chatted with the old master until late last night, so she thought the young miss would sleep a bit more. Well, today's weather is good. Leng Ruoxue sat up on the bed and looked at the warm sunshine outside the window. Yes, today's weather is good, and it's Valentine's Day in the Eastern Lagoon Empire. There are many people on the streets. Cui Zhu walked in with a water basin and a face full of excitement. Leng Ruoxue got dressed, washed up, and then asked Lu Tao to help her with a simple hairstyle. Valentine's Day. She did not expect this world to also have Valentine's Day. Leng Ruoxue was a little curious since she did not know how different it was compared to Valentine's Day in her original world. Miss, this Valentine's Day has a history. Cui Zhu deliberately created suspense. Tell me about it. According to the historical records of our Eastern Lagoon Empire, today is the day when the founding emperor and the empress of the Eastern Lagoon Empire became engaged. To commemorate their feelings, they set today as Valentine's Day. It is said that all the men and women who are engaged today will be blessed by the founding emperor, the simple little girl said with yearning. Leng Ruoxue nodded in understanding. Cui Zhu is already an adult and thinking about love. Miss, you're bullying me. Cui Zhu blushed and looked at her evil miss with tears in her eyes threatening to spill out at any moment. Is Grandpa up yet? Leng Ruoxue looked at Lu Tao, who had already set breakfast up. Old Master has entered the palace. Leng Ruoxue didn't expect her grandfather to enter the palace so early. She knew that it was all for her. She was so touched and felt so happy that there was a grandfather who treated her like a princess and loved her unconditionally. Cui Zhu, sit down and eat. Leng Ruoxue saw Cui Zhu still standing even though Lu Tao was already seated. Cui Zhu was still looking at her with an incomparably resentful look. Leng Ruoxue could not help but find this simple child funny. Chapter 6. Robbery 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Miss is bullying Cui Zhu, Qi Zhu murmured as she sat down at the table. Miss is just teasing you. Lu Tao couldn't help laughing. How did she not realize how adorable and interesting Cui Zhu was? Even she wanted to tease her. Lu Tao looked at her young miss. Her young miss had changed a lot since waking up from the coma. They were no longer allowed to kneel down before her, and they were asked to sit at the dining table together with her. She could still remember her young miss saying, "Although you are my maidservants, I hope that you will have a strong personality. Do you want to be a humble servant all your life? Or do you want to become someone successful? It's your choice. But I don't need people that only know how to wait upon me by my side." These words made Lu Tao truly realize that the young miss was no longer the silly young miss who needed them to help her with everything. The young miss now was aspiring to become a powerhouse whom everyone would admire. If they wanted to stay by the young miss's side, they had to keep up with her footsteps. Otherwise, they would only be getting farther and farther away from her, and she had decided to follow the young miss forever. After breakfast, let's go for a walk outside. Leng Ruoxue finished up her porridge. She had already spent a few days in this world, but she still hadn't explored the outside. In the Imperial Palace. "Great General, please wait for a moment. I will go and inform His Majesty first," a eunuch said respectfully as he led the way while bowing lowly. Even the emperor respected the great general. Leng Qingtian nodded, but his face was expressionless, and no one could tell what was on his mind. He didn't have the mood to appreciate the beauty of the imperial garden. He just wanted to settle the matter quickly and go back home to his precious granddaughter. The scenery of the imperial palace was beautiful, but it was not as meaningful as spending time with his Shuer. Moreover, it wasn't his first time here. It wasn't long before the eunuch came back to lead him to the emperor's study. "Your Majesty." Leng Qingtian bowed slightly to show his respect. "Ah, my dear general is back. It must have been a long journey." Sitting on the dragon throne, Emperor Li Sun welcomed Leng Qingtian cordially. "Your Majesty, the journey was fine, but my granddaughter is..." Leng Qingtian deliberately didn't finish his sentence and made a very heartbroken and distressed face. Seeing Leng Qingtian's expression, the emperor couldn't help cursing in his head. "This cunning old fox. You are really messed up this time. It seems like he won't be able to escape from marrying his granddaughter anymore." "Yes, my dear general. Your Majesty, I hope you will uphold justice for my granddaughter." "My dear general, I have already punished Yuer. But for the young lady of the Su family, she's not someone from the Eastern Lagoon Empire. Even if I want to punish her and vent anger for Ruoxue, there's nothing I can do about it. You are a senior who has served since my father's era, so I hope you will understand my difficulties. Of course, I have asked the Su family to bring her back and teach her a lesson. I'm sure she won't do it again. And the Su family is willing to compensate for hurting Ruoxue. Please give the youths another chance, and don't haggle over it with them." The emperor eloquently tried to persuade Leng Qingtian. He didn't want to offend the Su family, but neither could he displease an important official of the Eastern Lagoon Empire. He relied heavily on Leng Qingtian, and the entire Eastern Lagoon Kingdom needed this god of war. He only hoped that Leng Qingtian would give him, the emperor, some face and not haggle too much over it. Ruoxue was almost killed. I almost couldn't see her again. Your Majesty, I don't know how you are going to compensate us. Leng Qingtian's eyes narrowed with a sharp glare. He had long known that the emperor would say so, so he didn't expect much and didn't intend to go into it vehemently. Just like Shuer said, they could wait for a better opportunity to seek vengeance in the future. There was no need to go to extremes now. Now was the time to ask for more practical benefits. "This cunning old fox wants to rob me." Emperor Li Sun wasn't pleased, but he still put on a smile. As long as this old fox agreed to stop fussing over this incident, he was willing to pay some price. He could always find the Su family to get it back. It was the Su family's young lady's fault in the first place. So what if they were one of the 5 great families? They shouldn't have provoked this lunatic. Dragons had reverse scales, and so did this cunning old fox. No one should touch it. Don't worry, my dear general. I will definitely make it up to Ruoxue, Li Sun said through his clenched teeth. Thank you, Your Majesty. Leng Qingtian smiled as he took out a piece of paper from his storage ring. Your Majesty, Shuer was seriously injured, and in order for her to recover, we need these medicinal herbs. But we can't really afford all of them. Just take whatever you need from the Imperial Pharmacy, Li Sun said generously. Some medicinal herbs weren't an issue. Thank you, Your Majesty. Furthermore, here is a list of compensation we hope to get. Your Majesty and the Su family can just compensate with what's written here. I have no other presumptuous requests, Leng Qingtian said understandingly as he handed the list to the eunuch. The eunuch took the list and placed it on the emperor's desk. When Li Sun scanned through the list, his eyes immediately widened, and he almost choked. The eunuch quickly passed him a cup of water. After drinking the water, he was more composed. But the list still almost made him vomit blood in anger. There were only 10 items on the list, but each was priceless. Even if there was a price, there was no market. Take the crystal honey for example. The price had already inflated to 1,000 amethyst crystals per gram, but the amount on the list was 5 kilograms. It was ridiculous. Even with money, there was no place to buy it. Your Majesty, you can discuss the items on the list with the Su family, Leng Qingtian reminded, implying that the emperor didn't need to compensate by himself. Right. The Su family. The emperor immediately returned to composure from his initial shock and felt much better. With them, at least it won't be so bad. Your Majesty, I have another request. Leng Qingtian continued. What else, my dear general? The emperor's voice was even shaking slightly. Didn't he say there were no more presumptuous requests? Your Majesty, the 7th prince is talented and virtuous, and Ruoxue has always admired him. This time, she suffered an unexpected disaster because of the 7th prince. It's really. Chapter 7. Robbery, 2, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Yes, my dear general. Your Majesty, I feel that Ruoxue is not a match for the 7th prince, so I hope you will agree to cancel the engagement. I wish the 7th prince a happy marriage with Miss Su, Leng Qingtian interrupted the emperor, not giving him a chance to finish speaking. The emperor was stunned. He thought he misheard. How can I let Leng Qingtian cancel the engagement? Although Ruoxue is a simpleton, the engagement is too important for Yuer. My dear general, the engagement was bestowed by the previous emperor, the emperor reminded him. Your Majesty, I am sure you still remember what the late emperor promised me when he proposed the engagement. Leng Qingtian looked seriously into the emperor's eyes. My dear general, have you decided? There was nothing the emperor could do. He didn't want to cancel the engagement. After all, it was in your greatest interest. Unfortunately, Yuer did not understand. Yes, I have decided. Leng Qingtian took out the engagement token from his storage ring and handed it to the eunuch. The emperor took the token and instructed the eunuch to fetch the one he had to return. Emperor Li Sun went to a side hall after Leng Qingtian left. It was in the most inconspicuous corner of the imperial palace with absolutely no grandeur. But this place was the most restricted place in the entire palace because a very important person was living here. An old man in plain cotton clothing who was watering his flowers and plants raised his head. His wrinkled face frowned in displeasure. What are you doing here? Didn't I tell you not to disturb me if there's nothing important, the old man scolded. He was getting more and more disappointed with his descendants. None of them were capable. Old ancestor. What's wrong? The old man continued to fiddle with his flowers and plants. Leng Qingtian just came. Emperor Li Sun's face was somewhat tense. Then. I told him what you told me to tell him. Then what's the problem? The old man didn't even bother to raise his head. He proposed to cancel the engagement, the emperor said carefully. You agreed. The old man finally raised his head and looked straight at Li Sun with his turbid eyes. I can't disagree. My imperial father promised him that he could cancel the engagement at any time if he was not happy with it. The engagement was only an expedient political move for him to secure the throne. It was because it was only a temporary engagement that Ling Qingtian had agreed. Ah, fine. Fine. The old man sighed and continued fiddling with his flowers and plants. Your Majesty, General Leng has emptied the warehouse of the imperial pharmacy. Just as Emperor Li Sun returned to his resting palace, the eunuch who had led Ling Qingtian ran over in a panic. What? Say it again. The emperor thought he had heard wrong. Your Majesty, General Leng has emptied the warehouse of the imperial pharmacy. The young eunuch knelt on the floor, trembling. He knew he was in big trouble this time. The emperor was notoriously stingy, and General Leng had caused heavy losses to the emperor this time. There were a lot of herbs in the imperial pharmacy and even some extremely precious ones. The emperor likely didn't care too much about the common herbs, but the precious ones that were hard to find. Why didn't you stop him? The emperor's face turned green with fury. This servant couldn't stop him. General Leng took out more than 10 storage rings at once. Before this servant had time to react, he already stored everything into the rings. The young eunuch wailed. Useless. All useless. Guards, drag him out, the emperor angrily ordered the guards. Your Majesty, please calm down. Your health is more important. Eunuch Lu, the chief eunuch standing at the side, cautiously persuaded the emperor to calm down. Serving the emperor was like serving a tiger. Even though he was a trusted aide of the emperor, he still had to be careful in this situation. Ling Qingtian. Outrageous. The emperor gritted his teeth, his handsome face distorting in anger. Your Majesty, please calm down. This servant is sure that Ling Qingtian came prepared. Your Majesty was unprepared, Eunuch Lu said, implying that Ling Qingtian had planned this long ago to scheme against the emperor. Eunuch Lu, do you have any plan to save some face for me? The emperor looked expectantly at his favorite eunuch. Your Majesty, this servant thinks we need a long-term plan. But losing some money and items in exchange for the general no longer investigating the 7th prince and Miss Su should already be the best result. Eunuch Lu analyzed for the emperor. He knew that the emperor loved the 7th prince the most and was afraid that the general would not let go of the matter of his granddaughter being injured. The emperor thought for a moment. What you said is very reasonable. Come, arrange the carriage to go to Fragrance Palace. Thunder Knight, we gained a lot today. Ling Qingtian cheerful shared telepathically with his spirit beast. His spirit beast was a level 9 holy beast, a flying thunder leopard. It had the dual attributes of lightning and wind, and it was adept at flying. Not only was it very fast, but it was also one of the best holy beasts at attacking. Thunder Knight was introverted, and it just nodded its huge head in response to its master. I just realized today how enjoyable looting is. If there's another chance in the future, we shall do it together. Ling Qingtian laughed arrogantly in his head. In the spirit beast space, the giant black leopard was at a loss for words. Master has taken a liking to this kind of trickery, and he even wants me to join him. But I am a good, law-abiding beast. It must be Miss. She influenced Master. After all, Master has always been very upright, and it was all her idea this time. Ah, she's really formidable. No one should ever provoke her. Miss, why did you get us to dress up like this? Cui Zhu looked at her unfamiliar self in the mirror, feeling very puzzled. There was a girl too ordinary who could blend into any crowd. Are there a lot of people who know you in Phoenix City? Leng Ruoxue threw a question back instead while her beautiful eyes scanned back and forth between the two other girls. She was satisfied with her masterpiece. Of course. Everyone in Phoenix City knows that Sister Lu Tao and I are from the general's mansion. Cui Zhu answered. They had to reveal their identities so that no one dared to bully the young miss. Chapter 8. The Beast Pretending to be Pitiful. 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. That's right. I don't want others to recognize you too, Leng Ruoxue said indifferently. She had said things very clearly before. It would be best if they could understand, but if they still didn't understand, she wouldn't bother to explain. She would not leave useless people around her. Miss, Lu Tao understands, Lu Tao said hurriedly before Cui Zhu could react and signaled Cui Zhu to be silent with her eyes so as not to cause the young miss to be unhappy. Keep up then. Leng Ruoxue finished speaking, turned, and walked out the door. March in Phoenix City was the time when spring flowers started blooming. The weather today was especially refreshing. The wind was warm, the sun was shining, and the streets were bustling, mostly with pairs of lovers. The customs of the Eastern Lagoon Empire were rather open and carefree, and people were able to love freely. Leng Ruoxue looked at the traditional buildings on the streets, the dazzling arrays of shops, and the products that belonged to this world with a relaxed mood. She did not even realize that her peerless beauty was causing a storm on the streets, nor did she notice the deep gazes that had been watching her. Leng Ruoxue walked into a pet store. She saw the word "Feng" on the store sign when she entered. She knew that this was the second most popular shop among the 5 great families. The store area was not small, and it was divided into 2 floors. When she walked in, she first saw a few rows of shelves. The shelves were full of cages for pets. In the cages, the cute little beasts were either lying on their stomachs or standing. Although they were being sold as pets, they were all spirit beasts of relatively low level, cute in appearance, without any aggressiveness, and easy to tame. They had all been tamed, and no contract was required. They were the most suitable pets for noble ladies and young misses. Leng Ruoxue loved small animals, especially dogs. She had once raised one herself, but it got into an accident later. Since then, she had not raised any pets. Now that she saw these cute little things, she was very excited and wanted to buy one to raise. But she could only recognize bunnies among the beasts. Although the bunnies were very cute, she didn't have much interest in them. At this moment, she clearly felt that a gaze was watching her. She subconsciously searched for it and saw a cage in a somewhat isolated corner. There was a small black beast enclosed in the cage. Is it a cat? She thought it was a cat because it looked a little like a Persian cat, but it had a large fox-like tail. It was lying in the cage with its big, round, blue eyes looking at her pitifully. This gaze really made her not have the heart to reject it. Well, she admitted that it was cute. This little thing was really good at pretending to be innocent and pitiful. If she hadn't caught the lightning-fast flash of cunning in this little thing's eyes, she would have been fooled. The clerk, who had been lost in her beauty for a long time since she entered the store, finally recovered. He hurriedly stepped forward and looked at Leng Ruoxue in amazement. "Miss, may I help you with anything?" the clerk said very politely, fully demonstrating his professionalism. Leng Ruoxue pointed at the little guy in the cage. "How much for it?" "Biov, Miss wants to buy it." "Miss, to tell you the truth, it's not in good physical condition now. I am afraid it will not last long. There are many cute pets in our shop, and there are better ones upstairs. Why don't you look at others?" He tried to dissuade her and was only short of telling her not to buy it directly. Leng Ruoxue looked at the enthusiastic clerk with some amusement. "I am only interested in it." "How much for it?" "Miss, are you sure you want to buy it?" "Yes." Leng Ruoxue nodded gently. How could this little thing be about to die? Even though its black fur looked dull and its small body thin, seeming as though the wind could blow it away, Leng Ruoxue didn't believe that it was as weak as it appeared to be. 50 gold coins, the clerk said helplessly. He said everything he should say, yet this young lady still insisted on buying, so it was not possible for him not to sell it. However, he did not violate the Feng family's business ethics on honesty and integrity. Leng Ruoxue motioned for Lu Tao to pay. Then she took the weak-looking thing from the clerk, turned around, walked out of the store, and then shopped around again. Spring Wind House. That's a restaurant, right? I'm hungry, so let's go have something to eat. Leng Ruoxue looked at the small three-story building with exquisite and luxurious furnishings not far away. Miss, let's go somewhere else. This place isn't good, Cui Zhu said with an unnatural expression. Isn't good? What's wrong? I've decided. I want to eat here. She was really hungry. Miss. This time even Lu Tao spoke out to stop her. Her expression was not very good. Give me a reason. Leng Ruoxue's eyes flashed unpleasantly. She hated being hungry. Miss once went to the Spring Wind House for the seventh prince, but something happened later, and you are now forbidden to enter. Lu Tao explained cautiously, for fear that her young miss would be angry. That damn seventh prince again. Leng Ruoxue really hated that nasty seventh prince. He actually prevented her from even entering a place to eat. This sealed the tragic end of the unlucky seventh prince in the future. Let's go home. Leng Ruoxue lost the desire to eat out. Back at the general's mansion, Leng Ruoxue lay lazily on a recliner after eating. She held the now-fed little beast in her arms, basking in the sun, very relaxed. Lu Tao, are there any other places in Phoenix City where I am not welcomed? Leng Ruoxue asked casually while eating fruit and feeding her little pet in passing. Only the businesses of the Su family. The Spring Wind House is also owned by the Su family, Lu Tao explained. The Su family. Very good. She craved it in her heart. Anyone who dares to provoke me, Leng Ruoxue, will live to regret it, Leng Ruoxue thought as her hand gently stroked the soft fur of the little beast. Suddenly, she felt a tingling pain in her fingertips. This ungrateful little thing actually bit her. But before she could get angry, she felt a little dizzy, and then she heard a voice in her mind saying, I am willing to enter into a soul bond contract with you, where our souls will accompany each other through life and death. Then a gorgeously intricate purple contract array enveloped her and the little beast, and the contract was formally established. Chapter 9. The Beast Pretending to be Pitiful, 2, you are listening at novelfull.audio. At the side, Lu Tao was a little dumbfounded. Miss, actually made a contract with a low-level spirit beast. What kind of contract is this? Lu Tao was stunned and speechless because this contract array was something she had never seen before. After more than 10 minutes, the gorgeously intricate purple contract array slowly disappeared. Leng Ruoxue held the little black beast in both hands, her beautiful eyes shining with raging flames. She stared at the little beast fiercely, wanting to bore a hole in its small body with her stare. But the little beast used its cute appearance and watery blue eyes with tears spinning in them to stare at her innocently and pitiful. Pretending to be pitiful again. Leng Ruoxue was even angrier. If it weren't a little beast, Leng Ruoxue would have choked it to death. However, while she could be cold-blooded to humans, she had always been very caring toward animals, so she really couldn't do it. Big sister, woo. Big sister is so fierce. An immature male voice sounded in Leng Ruoxue's ears. Are you the one talking? Leng Ruoxue looked at the little beast in front of her suspiciously because most spirit beasts would address their owners as masters after establishing a contract. Baby can talk with big sister after making the contract. The little black beast nodded aggrievedly and looked at Leng Ruoxue with a perfectly guileless look. Don't you dare look at me with this expression. The flames of anger in Leng Ruoxue's eyes burned more vigorously. Tell me. Why did you establish the contract without my consent? Leng Ruoxue's face was covered with frost. She hated the feeling of being forced by deceit. Baby likes big sister. The fluffy beast's face actually showed a shy expression. So you forced it on me just because you like me. Leng Ruoxue was speechless. Moreover, what was that soul bond contract? Why had she never heard of it before? She knew two types of contracts. Equal contracts. The two parties who entered into the contract were of equal status as friends and could not be forced. If one party was injured and died, the other party would not suffer any harm. Master-slave contracts. This kind of contract was a type of forced contract where the initiative was in the hands of the human. The status of the two parties was not equal. The human was the master, and the spirit beast would follow. If the master died, the spirit beast would also die. However, if the spirit beast died, the master would not be affected. This type of contract was the most unfair way of contracting with the spirit beasts. This was also the main reason why some proud spirit beasts would rather die than be in a contract with humans. There were very few humans who would be willing to enter into an equal contract with spirit beasts after all. However, it was precisely because of master-slave contracts that the status of beast trainers was becoming better and better. What contract did you just enter into with me? She still remembered the voice that said, "Our souls will accompany each other through life and death." This sort of contract was not within the scope of her knowledge. It's the soul bond contract. Baby will always be with big sister and will never leave you, the little beast said happily. Then what if I die? Then baby will also die. If big sister is alive, baby will be alive. If big sister dies, baby will also die. Baby will never leave big sister. Wait, what do you mean by never leave me? It shouldn't be what I'm thinking, right? Is this little thing planning to rely on me? Is it not enough to follow me for this life? It wants to follow me in all my reincarnations. This is what it means, right? Leng Ruoxue was uncomfortable. What kind of lousy contract is this? How can it be so overbearing? And the contract has already been established. She had no chance to refuse and could only live with it. Not only that, but she also had to protect this useless-looking thing, which looked as though it did not possess any bit of offensive power, lest it died and she died with it. Where did you learn this contract? Leng Ruoxue was very curious. This contract was not within the scope of people's cognition, but a little beast actually knew about it and tricked her into it. She was so angry just thinking about it. Baby doesn't know. Baby knew about it ever since baby was born. The little beast knew that it had annoyed the big sister it liked, so it was a little cautious, its big watery eyes still peeking at Leng Ruoxue from time to time. Leng Ruoxue could see that it was an underage child. Even if she were to probe further, it would not know. Is baby your name? Leng Ruoxue heard it calling itself baby. The little beast named Baby nodded, and its big blue watery eyes looked at Leng Ruoxue with affection. Leng Ruoxue thoughtfully looked at the little beast in front of her. Could it be that this little guy isn't a low-level spirit beast? As far as she knew, only advanced spirit beasts with intelligence could name themselves, and low-level spirit beasts didn't have that IQ. However, she didn't expect this little thing to know what kind of spirit beast it was, so she did not ask anymore since she would know one day anyway. Big sister will call you baby from now on then. Leng Ruoxue said, finally recognizing this younger brother. After all, they were hanging on the same rope now. Miss, old master has returned. Got it. Leng Ruoxue, who was teasing baby, stood up and walked to Listening Snow Pavilion. In her room, she saw her grandfather sitting in a chair with a smug face, eating the pastries that she had ordered prepared in advance. Shuer, come here quickly. Leng Qingtian couldn't wait to tell Leng Ruoxue about his performance in the palace as soon as he saw her. Leng Ruoxue listened quietly while pouring tea for her grandfather. In fact, even if her grandfather didn't tell her, she could guess how angry the emperor would be, especially for breaking off the engagement. A simpleton had declined the marriage with the seventh prince most loved by the emperor. It wouldn't sound pleasant if such news were to spread. "Grandpa, I'm planning to train in seclusion," Leng Ruoxue suddenly said after patiently listening to Ling Qingtian. There were too many things she wanted to learn, but she was too weak now. A great spiritualist might be considered a powerhouse in the eyes of ordinary people, but it is far from enough for her. She hoped to break through as soon as possible and advance to spiritual monarch because only then would she be equivalent to stepping into the threshold of the powerhouses. It might only be one stage between great spiritualist and spiritual monarch, but it was not easy to break through. Throughout history, countless practitioners were stuck at the great spiritualist stage. It would be possible to use spirit pills to help with the breakthrough if they were from big families, but only the elites in the families could enjoy this treatment. Disciples with ordinary aptitudes would not have that qualification. Moreover, only when she advanced to the spiritual monarch stage could she learn the advanced spiritual skills she was most interested in. Chapter 10. Preparations to enter seclusion. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Grandpa supports you. Ling Qingtian was actually very happy and pleased to see his precious granddaughter working so hard. One must know that while the Ling family only had a few people, they had never been weak. He was just a tiny bit reluctant, as it had been a long time since he saw his granddaughter. "Shuer, this is for you." Ling Qingtian took out a storage ring and